George Janko recently had Girls Gone Bible on his podcast, and the conversation of his use of language with the F word and other curse words did come up, and his response to it all may come at a complete shock. Now, if you don't know who Girls Gone Bible are, they're fairly new to the Christian podcast world, and their YouTube channel has skyrocketed to almost 300,000 subscribers, and their first video just being posted 8 months ago. So they're elevating to a whole new level in that area. And then, of course, George Janko coming from Impulsive and then leaving that platform to kind of focus on his own podcast and grow that, which he's pushing 2.5 million subscribers as well on his channel. So he brings Girls Gone Bible onto his podcast. They're having discussion topics about relationships. What do women actually look for in a man? Toxic masculinity. They talked about a lot of different things, but what ended up being a big discussion towards the end and what caught a lot of people's attention was when the girls did bring up George's foul mouth. Now, George explained his side and he let them know, hey, listen, a lot of things keep me up at night, but me cussing, using the F word, the S word, the BS word, whatever cuss words you can think of, that doesn't make me lose sleep at night. And I don't have any conviction with that. And his viewpoint is, hey, I'm looking at the scriptures. When they talk about this, it's not talking about using cuss words like the words we use today. And so that's just kind of how he left it. But thankfully, the girls did not hold back. Especially one of them, she really pressed George and used her own personal life as an example and saying how she was similar to George with all of this and his viewpoints and his thoughts. But even though she knew it was sinful, and she said, even though I knew the Bible speaks saying we should not use cursing, cuss words, swear words, any of that, she's like, I pushed it to the side. And she goes, but I did that with other sins as well. But eventually the Lord really convicted her and brought it out. And it actually happened, she said, when she fasted for 24 hours, no food, no drink, nothing. And she said she was so full of the Lord that a friend of hers called her and actually used the F word while she was on the phone with her. And she said when she heard that from her friend, it actually made her body cringe. And for whatever reason, when she said that, that's when George's mind seemingly started to change from what he originally thought of it. And then it led George to saying, after she explains her side, explains why it is a sin, George then says on the podcast right then and there, I vow to no longer use a swear word going forward, starting right now. So he makes this bold vow to just, I'm never going to do it again. Now, this is coming from a man who cussed as if it was just another word. So, of course, people were reacting and saying, oh, George is making this big thing, because that is one thing that George has against him when it comes to being a Christian is, man, you casually are sleeping with your girlfriend who is now his fiance, but you're casually using cuss words. You know, you're doing these sins so casually, even though you know it's wrong, but you're casually just going about with it, and it doesn't seem like you're having any heart to change these things. But then, after this podcast, seems like George is turning a new leaf. Now, we can be praying for George, and I would encourage you to understand as well the production side of things. George had that podcast with those two Girls Gone Bible, and then after that posted a podcast with Jake Paul. And if you watch that, in the first minute, George is cussing. Now, we have to understand that video with Jake Paul could have easily been made months ago, weeks ago, before that. Who knows when that is? But there is a quote from George to let his fans know what is going on with him cussing. And he says this, I put a rubber band around my wrist to help me stop swearing, and the band broke. Ha ha ha. This is going to be a lot harder than I thought. But the good news is it does feel different when I do swear. So hopefully that's the first step. I'm here to say, George, that is the first step. Listen, some people can easily just stop a sin right away. And then there's some sins where you do have to wrestle with it. But it's encouraging to hear that he actually feels different now when he does cuss. So as Christians, we should rejoice in that. And we should continue to pray for George and pray for the sanctification process. And thankfully, somebody finally, who George had on his podcast, was bold enough to call him out on this particular sin.